where should Classic WoW end?
Recently, there's been some speculation about a certain questionnaire that talks about the potential future for a true Classic Plus, as well as the imminent release of the War Within for retail World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
Now, whilst Cataclysm might be going steady at the moment, the hype for Season of Discovery and Phase 4 seems to have dwindled somewhat. Whilst hype for retail WoW with the War Within and the new World Soul Saga continues to go on the rise. And much like a guy at a party who has outstayed his welcome, as he begins to glance towards the acoustic guitar and ask if anyone wants to hear him play Wonderwall, the progression of expansions and future of Classic WoW in general is beginning to feel a bit aimless and uncertain, with
That is true. I do agree with that. It does feel like we're at a spot where do we go? Is it like Cata? Does that go into Mob? What's gonna happen to Season of Discovery? Are we gonna get a SOD era? What about a fresh Classic? Hardcore servers are hardcore servers. That's fine. I mean, they do what they do, but we're like in a weird limbo right now where what's really gonna happen. So I do agree with that for sure. And I also agree with the fact that why the heck, sorry for the language, is every WoW YouTuber British? Oh my gosh, they are all British. You are so correct.
Arguments over how far the progression of expansions should go.
Yeah.
As for many people, Cataclysm's release was already too far past the original trilogy, and with no era servers for Burning Crusade or Wrath in sight, it's worth taking a look at where the progression of expansions for Classic WoW should actually end.
Yeah.
So let's dive in.
I mean, when I'm thinking about Cataclysm, going into Mob, going into VOD and all that stuff, I don't have a big, like... I mean, Mob is cool and all that, but I don't think I have like a big, huge desire for Mob personally. I think it starts to cater to a little bit of a different vibe of people. I don't really have a big issue with it, really. I don't really think it's a bad thing. I probably would give it a try if they did it. But I'm just wondering, like, okay, do we just go all the way then? Like, where does it end, right? What's gonna happen? Legion was dope though. I never played Legion, but then you should just go retail. That's in a way that's what I'm thinking. It's like, okay, we have Mists of Pandaria, but in a way then I might as well just kind of play current WoW, right? For me, that's how I see it. And if I want to play those classic experiences, I would rather do like vanilla and like SOD and all that stuff, right? Because it is getting very current WoW, right? Into Mob and that stuff, right? They have to stop at Legion, but yeah, maybe there's some people that don't want it to stop at that, right? Mob is gonna be fire. I think a lot of people do want Mob, like, really heavily. I don't have a big, really, like, lust. That's a strange word, but, like, lust for Mob, because I don't have any recollections of playing it. I did it on Mob Remix, and it was fine. It was okay, but I didn't really, like, it didn't blow me away. But that was also, like, a different way of experiencing Mob, to be fair.
To start, I think it's worth throwing it right back to 2019 when we first headed into Classic Vanilla WoW. And Classic was a brand spanking and shining new attraction for a lot of players.
That's fair,
as retail WoW was kind of in the gutter with Battle for Azeroth, and especially as time progressed into Shadowlands. And at Vanilla's release, it did feel like, relatively due to its success, that we'd probably head into Burning Crusade, as well as hope that built for Wrath of the Lich King, and well, that's just what happened. As looking back, we see these as an original trilogy for World of Warcraft due to mainly taking place in the old world, and building on the already existing talent trees. However,
in a way, for me, man, for me, I think Classic is just the first three. That's what I see. Okay, if I want to be really strict about it, Classic is just vanilla. That's like my very, very extreme take on it, right? I think TPC is good, but vanilla is just the true one, right? And then you could sprinkle in some TPC. You could sprinkle in that. But Wrath is... After playing it through it again, it was okay, but, you know...
Combined with several changes that Wrath made alongside the major evil that Cataclysm then brought, most people do tend to see the cutoff for what you maybe consider Classic WoW to be the end of Wrath of the Lich King. Hence why the announcement for Cataclysm divided a lot of Classic players, seeing a lot of existing players instantly quit mid-Icecrown Citadel, as they saw no future in Classic WoW anymore. Sprinkle this with the fact that Dragonflight also managed to pull off a miracle in retail WoW, and recover it back to a healthy state, unbelievably. Alongside the announcement of the promising World Soul Saga, Classic didn't quite have the same pull that it once had after its initial release. However,
to be fair though, expecting vanilla WoW like, sorry, expecting Classic WoW to retain the freaking hype it had in 2019, that was like an unparalleled, that was like the stars aligning for hype. Dude, everybody was playing Classic, like literally everybody. It was an unbelievable amount of hype. That is no way like, that's like sustainable. That's crazy, right? I think Classic WoW is quite healthy for what it is. They caught a lightning in a bottle. Yeah, it was crazy hype. It was so insane. Like I remember seeing like Deadmines guide videos hitting almost 1 million views on YouTube just casually from like random channels here and there. Like it was so hype. It was insane. Right, it was crazy. I think you just hate Wrath because you didn't have a good guild for hard content. I didn't hate Wrath. We to be fair, probably would have enjoyed it more with a better raid group. But this is a different experience, right?
But I'd argue that now it does seem like the door has been opened to a longer progression of expansions, due to mainly Cataclysm Classic's release, and well, to be honest, how surprisingly well Cataclysm has actually been received, now that the expansion is up and running.
Cataclysm
there were issues within the pre-patch in some ways, and other teething issues, but generally speaking, the build-up to the expansion seemed to be way more negative than the actual ongoing experience of the expansion. And
dude, Cata got so much hate.
As someone who didn't enjoy Cataclysm 14 years ago, I've actually kind of enjoyed it this time around. Yet there isn't the same intensity of interest in Cataclysm compared to Wrath BC or Vanilla. And I have zero motivation to level up any alts in Cataclysm either, so it's not quite the same vibe that you get from the original trilogy either though. Which is why Season of Discovery and various projects based in Vanilla such as the Fresh Server movement organised by players themselves tend to be very popular, alongside a consistent shout for era servers for Wrath and Burning Crusade. As there is a yearn for a lot of classic players who do want to play a version of WoW that is stapled somewhere within the original trilogy, as it feels like a home base to return to. And now, as a result, we have these issues and ambiguity surrounding classic WoW.
Where do we go?
How far are we taking this thing? The argument could be made that a lot of these expansions are now classic due to how old they are. I mean, Cataclysm is 14 years old. It's not exactly a spring chicken anymore. And
that's crazy, man. When you think about it like that, dude, that's insane.
Once you've opened Pandora's box, it's hard to stop any justification for continuing to release expansions.
True.
I mean, there will be enough support for Mists of Pandaria for sure, and especially a chunk of support for Legion.
But like, where do we go then? Do we stop at Legion? Is that it, or what? Right? I agree straight to Legion. So many people agree with that, and I've also heard some people argue for the fact that maybe we should have more like smaller like event things, like the Plunderstorm thing and the Mob remakes, maybe Legion remakes and whatnot. You know, Classic feels like it's such in a limbo with what's gonna happen.
Legion potentially being the first expansion that a lot of retail players who probably started there would actually come back to try out. Yet we have the hump of Warlords of Draenor logged in the middle there, which could be a bit of a tough sell to players. But if expansions are released as a passive interest, with the big carrot on the stick being Mists of Pandaria and Legion, I'd assume they'd somewhat be able to justify having to release Warlords of Draenor along the way also. And in many ways, maybe it does make sense to continue up to Legion, which felt like a significant end to one of WoW's big storylines. After the
Legion was the end of WoW. Like, dude, like Sargeras getting imprisoned, like all that, like, dude, come on, man. That felt like such an end of WoW.
Full frontal Legion invasion of Azeroth.
It
and
really
spoiler
did.
alert, Sargeras then stabbing Azeroth and being beamed away by
like,
a
look
big
at this
laser
shit.
ship. And it's also arguable that the War Within, which is starting this new phase for World of Warcraft, is picking up where Legion ended. So maybe there is an overarching idea introduced into the classic expansion progression, that you're reliving the old story in the World of Warcraft storyline that builds up to the new WoW storyline in the World Soul Saga for retail. And this is your way of seeing how things came to be. Yet, this really comes down to how much interest they'd be able to drum up for releasing some of these expansions now. And once again,
I feel like if they kept going down the line of like VOD and Legion and such and Mob, I feel like it would probably be like similar to Cata in terms of hype. I think. I don't know. I think there's a lot of players that would like to play Mob again, but I think it would just be like an okay player base. It wouldn't be anything crazy. It wouldn't be anything, insane. But there would be a decent chunk of players that would play it, and would that justify Blizzard doing it? Maybe, because it's easy, right? Mob is peak WoW. A lot of people say that. I don't have too much to say about that, because I didn't play Mob, man.
After Cataclysm's release, I think you can probably slap the label of Classic WoW on any expansion now, except maybe for Battle for Azeroth and Shadowlands onwards, as I'm pretty sure even Blizzard wants you to forget that Shadowlands happened at this point. But when Classic was released, the initial charm of it was re-experiencing these early expansions, but it certainly feels like the goalposts have moved in this time, and unfortunately the Classic team has backed themselves into a bit of a corner now.
Very much.
The Classic team stated that with Season of Discovery, they're attempting to prove themselves, and that there would be a worthwhile long-term project to build here to Blizzard. And to be
There's
honest,
potential
they've
still,
done
though.
that enough to prove there is interest in mainly vanilla WoW, and an adapted version of vanilla WoW with new content.
I still think, man, if they can actually do it well with the Classic Plus, not do anything super crazy, ridiculous like SOD has been, but just do a very simplified version with like some small quality of life and maybe some new content, dude, that could be crazy. But will they do that? Who the heck knows, right?
For all of Season of Discovery's faults, you can't deny that there is a demand for this kind of game mode somewhere. Maybe just without some of the stranger decisions that Season of Discovery made. But in that demand, the demand too continues for BC and Wrath era servers, which in my opinion need to be set up in the same way that we have vanilla servers, as a baseline for players to return to during the low tide of new content. For example, I will always return
I don't know if they're doing era for both of those, man. I feel like if it came to that, it would be better if they just did vanilla TBC into Wrath as like a rotating server where people got to go through the experiences, right? But I don't know, era for everything, because then we reach like a whole other thing with like, okay, now we have Classic era, TBC era, Wrath era, Cataclysm era. Like that's a lot, right? But you know, I like them to make the completely broken builds viable and add new content. I think it would just be very minor changes, making some of the stuff viable, and then new dungeons, new zones, new content, and that's it. Very simplified things, nothing crazy, nothing ridiculous, but just quite simple, right? Era WoW, you just gave Blizzard an idea. Maybe.
Diablo 2 when there's not much new content around for other games. And I do the same for BC or Wrath era servers also. So I don't agree that era servers would split the player base, as realistically you can't split players that just cancel their subscription when they have no interest in playing. But in this you can argue that the overall aim of Classic WoW shouldn't be focused on the progression of expansions anymore, and that these resources should be directed into a few era servers, but mainly for developing new projects within vanilla WoW that do have a true long-term potential for the lifespan of Classic. And if you
I feel like just going down the road of releasing like the expansions is the easy route, right? But the other stuff has more potential. Rotating vanilla TBC Wrath is what I think is the best, like Diablo 2 ladders. That is a very viable way of doing it, and I think if that was to be done, a lot of people would be quite happy with that. A rotating server that had like a ladder system, not a ladder system, but like somewhat like a ladder system where you just went vanilla TBC Wrath, and then after that it would like reset and it would go vanilla TBC Wrath over a period of like 2-3 years, right? I think a lot of people would probably play that. A lot of people would really like that. You know, nothing crazy, nothing like, you know, super big changes, just vanilla TBC Wrath on a 3-year cycle or whatever, right? Or maybe a little bit less, right? MMOs shouldn't be seasonal. I see that idea. I see what you mean with that for sure as well. But I think the way that a lot of people do play vanilla and classic and all these games, it kind of is a seasonal game. You know, actually, like with the whole fresh movement, and people want fresh servers and stuff all the time. Because classic is just like a different way of playing, I guess. They should do for Classic Plus when they start expanding on content, do a stories, can be replayed in stories. I do understand why you dislike the seasonal thing, because a lot of people have that attachment to their characters in MMOs where like they don't want to get rid of them and they don't want to like reset their whole thing. I don't have a big problem with that personally. I like the idea behind starting anew and stuff like that, but a lot of people do dislike that, and that's a very good point to make as well. People want it fresh after first MC clear. You can't make the crowd happy. Very true as well. You just add small content that makes things like classic, well, but rotating progression. Yeah.
Just keep releasing
it. It's interesting talking about this, like seeing what you guys think about it too, though.
But at the rapid rate that Classic is doing, I mean, with Cataclysm barely getting a year, you're going to be heading into Dragonflight Classic before you know it.
I feel like a lot of nuances left out of this discussion. The player base is already split between 3-4 versions of the game, and Endless throwing more versions of the game because you can play their flavor of the month is not available right now, and that's where the big problem is, right, Lancefar? The player base is so split. And we don't know what's gonna happen. Like, are we gonna get another version of the game? Are we gonna get a fifth or sixth version of WoW? Like, are we gonna get VOD, Legion, new, fresh? Like, what's gonna happen? And it's because we don't really know the definitive like answer to it that it's such a disarray right now, right? And people don't really know what they want or what they get or anything. And if anything, it's probably turning a lot of people off from playing because they don't really know where the future of the characters that they're playing will be on, right? Like, what's gonna happen with it? Some of us wouldn't be playing WoW at all if there wasn't so many versions. That probably is true as well, yeah. As a classic Andy, would you rather have classic or sod and this part? If I would rather have classic or sod, well, when you say classic, what do you mean classic? Because that's a very broad word now. Vanilla 1 to 60. So do you mean era? If I would rather just play era or like a fresh vanilla? Vanilla or sod? I think... if you're asking me if like one I could only play for the rest of my time and what that's and everything like that, I would probably say like normal vanilla, right? If I could only have one, right? But that's because for me sod is very experimental and stuff, and it's not necessarily like the whole end of the whole thing. But I'm enjoying sod for what it is. There's just so many versions. Yeah, it's such a it's confusing.
The majority of classic players wondering what on earth is even going on now. Overall, I think if the train has left the station at this point, heading up
they morphed their game into a seasonal MMO. It doesn't need to be like that. Yeah, I think players have really gotten used to the whole seasonal vibe, and that's a big problem because now they're constantly expecting new things, right? So instead of the traditional old MMOs where like things are kind of slow, people want constant new stuff, right?
Legion could be a sensible enough.
It's hard
as enough people will want Mists and Legion, with Legion being the carrot on the stick to get people to go through WoD again. But once again, spoiler alert, Sargar is stabbing Azeroth with the huge sword, is where we're picking up in the war within for this new phase in the World Soul Saga. So developing Classic as a new idea to see the story that led up to that could make sense for the next few years whilst the World Soul Saga is going on. Personally for me, I don't really care what they do when it comes to releasing old expansions now. They could stop tomorrow and I'd be happy enough. For me,
I feel like kind of the same. I'm not like, I wouldn't be super sad if they stopped at Cata. I wouldn't be really hyped if they continue. For the Cataclysm Classic stuff, I'm not really like, I'm playing it. It's fun, but I'm not like super attached to it anymore, right? Era and retail doesn't need anymore. Just those two. Randy, what's up, dude? What's up, Vates?
I want some Era Realms for Burning Crusade and Wrath setup, alongside the Classic team to mainly focus on developing new game modes like Season of Discovery but better, or a long-term Classic Plus project, as I'm not really yearning to see Mop, Warlords or Legion again if I'm entirely honest.
I kind of feel the same. In a way, I feel the same a little bit about this personally.
If I'm also entirely honest, I'd probably play through them again if they were on offer, but I'd rather focus into developing Classic for the long term.
I very much agree with him though.
Rather than just re-releasing expansions where interest will continue to dwindle, that will be taking away from...
You never played Legion? Yeah, and I don't know, I don't really have a big... I mean, yeah, I will probably try it and maybe I would really like it, but I don't really have a big desire, like, oh my god, I wish I could play Legion, right? Not really, but maybe I would like it. I don't have like a big... I just don't have big feelings toward it. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't... Yeah, if they release it and they do it, okay, I'll give it a try. But if they don't, it wouldn't bother me either. Right? Yeah, I'm just kind of impartial on that.
Resources that could go towards new projects.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I have the luxury of enjoying both retail and classic, and the World Soul Saga with the War coming out soon is what's taking my interest at the moment.
Yeah, true. I'm actually up to.
There are a lot of players out there who just feel somewhat neglected at this point. So I'm hoping some big decisions are made on this way for the next few years to give a clearer path of where classic is actually going. As someone who...
Let's be honest, we probably won't know too much before like next year, because there's no BlizzCon this year. So there probably won't be too much information being given the next foreseeable future, right?
Who mainly makes videos about classic with a sprinkle of retail in there. Even I'm kind of struggling what to say about classic at the moment. Unlike retail, which has now done a 180 and seems to have a lot going for it and a buzz around it for the first time in years.
BlizzCon is cancelled this year.
Let me know what you think. Where should classic WoW end its progression of expansions? Or what really should be the next long-term aim of the game? Be sure to let me know in the comments below. Yet, as always, take care out there, and I'll see you on the next one.
I don't
As
know.
always, if you're new here, feel free to like and subscribe. And on that note, I think I'll say ta-ra for now, and I'll see you later.
I very much agree with what he's saying, though. I think them working on like some like little projects, like the stuff that they've been doing with Sod, focusing on more like the vanilla version of it with a plus version, and then doing the retail stuff is probably what makes me the most excited. Because I like the classic stuff, and I also really like the retail stuff, right? But yeah, it's a big question, and it's a big weird thing at the moment with WoW, right? Like where the heck are we going with this whole situation? It should have ended at Wrath. Classic Kata sounds like an oxymoron. Maybe it's just semantics, but Kata and Beyond feels more like remixes. I hope for some original trilogy rolling progression servers soon. I do agree with that to a large degree. Yeah, to me, like it's very much the same as this guy's saying here. Wouldn't go past Mob, just go vanilla TBC Wrath cycle, keep vanilla era and Wrath era. You can dump characters at the end of the cycle, inspired from the original D2 ladder, non-ladder system. Vanilla BC and Wrath should have all era servers, save everything else for WoW Remix. If it stops before Dragonflight, I'll be disappointed. Dragonflight is the most... Okay, this is like a shitpost. That's quite arbitrary though. Why would you want to keep replaying the trilogy over and over and over again? Probably because people like that and people enjoy that as the classic versions of the game, right? Same reason as to why some other people might want to enjoy other versions of it too, right? In a way, I do agree. I think like vanilla TPC Kata is like the original trilogy. That's like the thing I see as classic, and then working on maybe like some remixes and then doing retail stuff might be a good way of doing it. And then who knows, some classic plus, right? But yeah. It's a hard thing to argue with and like talk about because there's so many people that people want different things from it, and nobody's really agreeing, right? Why should Kata and Upwards be remixes? Why not TBC remix? Well, because we already had TBC Classic, right? But again, you could be right, Xmasher. Maybe it should be Mob remix or the Mob Classic, VOD Classic, Legion Classic. Maybe that's the way. Maybe that's the way of doing it, you know?